That's an odd one. I quite like those little stars. Where were they? Magic. Well, no, not that one. I think that one, Magic 5, is probably good for a laser, so let's bring that into our weapons laser directory. And I'm just going to call that particle. And how big is that? We might want to scale it down if it's too big. 512. Hell no. That is not going into our game at that resolution. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Sprite and we're just going to bring that down to about a quarter and save it. Right, like these sprites aren't going to get much bigger than that. Cool, so now we can create a new particles material, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to immediately save that so we have it available in our file system for later. And we'll call this laser particles material. Okay. And grab our texture here for our particle. Fantastic. So, what do we think? Well, our direction is certainly not going to be that. It's going to be a -1. And we want it to spread out in about 90 degrees. And we want no gravity to affect, because in fact we have no gravity in this game. It's top-down in space, so we don't really need it. But I can give them some initial velocity, and that's going to make them emanate outwards. So, in fact, we want it to go in the other direction, because if we imagine our beam end being at the end, well, that was way too much. Say 500. Okay. So if this is the beam start, and let's just grab that height and put that up to 400, and the offset is -200, right? And the beam end should be -400 as well. All right. So this is sort of how we're visualizing our laser. It's shooting out from the center and it's hitting something, and our particles are emanating backwards, right? Because they're colliding with whatever this is colliding with. So they're wanting to go back towards whoever's shooting the laser, right? Now, I think maybe that spread is a little bit too much. So, all right. So the emission shape, I think it makes sense for that to be a point because lasers are quite sharp. And we'll put a little bit of randomness onto the lifetime, so they don't always last the same amount of time. And I think the biggest thing right now is we need a scale curve and a scale random. So I think the scale should be quite random. And the scale curve, we should be starting off pretty small. And maybe just going up something like that, but that's probably too small. So, yep, cool. All right, I think that's pretty decent. So the angle we emit them should be fully random. So this is the initial rotation. Okay. And we might as well make it fully random. Cool. I like to put a little bit of dampening on my particles. It makes them sort of linger in the air a bit more. Okay. Say about 60. Okay. So we're going to change these particles to be a additive material, but for now it's better to visualize them using their black and white texture. Okay, now the next thing, have a look. I don't think I'm going to bother with colors just yet. What I do want is to have a little bit of, well, not that, a little bit of angular velocity. So I'll say like about 100, but we want full randomness there. Okay, so there's a little bit of a spin there. Probably can spin that even more. Maybe even more than that. Yeah, no, that was too much. Okay, cool. So one thing I want to do is curve our color with a gradient. And I want it to start at white and then just fade out. Right. Cool. So now we're starting to get a little bit more life in these particles. It's still something I'm not really happy about. I think maybe if we bring the lifetime down, that'll make them feel more dense. Cool. And then I'm just going to create a new canvas item material, and we may as well save this as well. And I might just put that in some sort of like utilities folder, or yeah, utils, and we'll just call this the additive canvas item material. And of course, it's just going to be an add material there. All right. And do we want a little bit of explosiveness? A bit of randomness, I think, across the whole particle system, and we don't really need any explosiveness. Cool, all right. Oh, Wit G Lint, thank you for the follow. How is it going? Are you a game developer or a general software engineer? You do Godot? Okay. So this is essentially the graphic effect we need. and I'm just going to turn emitting to off. And I like to do that almost, oops, we want to attach at the laser. So I like to put emitting off and then always just turn the emitting on here on the ready function. So on ready var, we'll say the particles is equal to $particles2d, right? And on ready, we just say the particles dot emitting is true. Okay. I just realized we want to replace this actually with an area 2D. So we change type here and we do an area 2D. Okay, and what we're going to do now is add a collision shape for the area 2D to consider its collision. Okay. And we're just going to put a little circle on the end there. So that is essentially going to determine where the damage, like if we're hitting something with our ray, anything within the circle is going to get damaged by our laser. And I think we're also going to want a timer, which is, sorry. I'm just going to call this the damage timer. Right, so when you first enter the laser, you're going to take 1 damage. Then every second that you remain in the laser, you're going to take another damage. And what we're going to need this damage timer to do is essentially count 1 second for us. We could do that in code, but it is kind of nice to do this in Godot with a simple timer like so. Cool. So this is a callback. I'm going to create a new method here, which I am going to consider part of our public API, which is just a pattern I'm using right now. And when we create any weapon, we have a creator and a strength. So the strength represents how much time the player has held down the shoot button, right? And that's going to be a float, and we're just going to default it to full strength. In fact, maybe it's better to default it to 50 half strength. And I'm just going to call this variable new strength. And so let's set our strength to the new strength whenever we get something. And then we're going to say add. We're going to say creator.add child self, right? So we want to be a child of the player. So when the player spins around, we want to follow the direction of the player. And cool. Now, on our physics process, what we want to do is we want to grab a reference to our raycast. So I'm going to say on ready var ray equals $raycast2d. So our ray, we're going to say ray dot I just realized we have the help built into Godot, which I keep forgetting to use. The raycast 2D what do we want? Is colliding.